Okay, great. So now I'm going to show you those commonly used VPN configuration for MAM mode, aggressive mode, the certificate-based IPsec, and finally the Ssl Vpn configuration. First of all, let's have a look the MAM mode at first. In this topology, we use two virtual firewall to establish the IPsec VPN connection. So one side are using IP 10.86.100.195. Another also using the fixed IP address, which is .197. This is we call MAM mode because both sides are using static IP. Let's have a look how to configure for the sites that using static IP. So this is the firewall 195. By default, I assume you already have this basic network configuration set, so the device is able to connect to internet. Then let's go back to config for the IPsec. First of all, you need to configure for the phase 1 proposal and also for the phase 1 assay, which is the VPN peer list. I already pre-configured. As you can see here, you need to set for the IPsec VPN name, the interface that you used to connect to peer. And also in this case, we are using IPv4. And protocol standard, we are using IKEv1. And mode is MAM mode because both sides using static IP. And the PR IP, which is the peer side, the public IP is 197. And then you need to call the proposal you just created. So in this case, you can use the predefined proposal directly. And then, because as you can see, we use PSK, which is the pressure key for the phase 1 proposal and negotiation. So you need manually add the pressure key. And also in the advanced configuration, the connection will be bidirectional. So it's better to enable as bidirectional. And also, as we mentioned before, it's better to enable the DPD, the detection for the tunnel. In this case, we are able to detect the tunnel status, and then click OK. So we already done the phase 1 configuration. And then we will go to the phase 2 configuration for the tunnel settings. So you need to add the peer configuration here. So this is the peer configuration we had done before. And then you need to configure for the tunnel information. So in this case, because this is a side-to-side IPsec, so we use the mode as tunnel. And then you need to select the phase 2 proposal. In this case, we just use the predefined one. And proxy ID, as I mentioned, both sides are using Hailstone firewall, so we can use Auto. If you are using different firewalls from different vendor, you need manually add the proxy ID for local LAN and peer LAN. And also in the advanced configuration, we need to enable the Auto Connect. In this case, the device will automatically trigger the VPN negotiation without manually sending the traffic. So this is the phase 2 configuration. for the IPsec SA. After that, we have configured for both phase 1 and phase 2. And after you added the tunnel interface, the tunnel route, and also policy, you can go to the monitor page to check the VPN connection, to check the VPN connections, to see if the VPN had been successfully established. So here is the status. So active means VPN already established between both sides. So this is the basic configuration for the main mode, And next one, I'm going to show you the configuration steps for the aggressive mode. As you can see in this topology, so we changed the IP in the REST firewall. So left one, we still use the static. So the IP address is $777. And the right one, we changed the IP to be distributed from the DHCP server, which is $197. So in this case, because the right one that using dynamic IP, so we need to use the aggressive mode, and the firewall that with the dynamic IP address will be the initiator, and the left firewall will be the responder. Let's have a look how to config in this case. So this is the one that using dynamic IP. So we configure for the phase one. So this is the interface that we connected to the peer, and then you need to change the VPN negotiation mode to aggressive because we are having dynamic IP that assigned in this firewall. And then the peer, because this configuration is for peer, so the peer firewall that using static IP, which is $77. And for your local, because you are using dynamic, so we use FQDN to differentiate the name. So local name, local ID can be host name or can be domain name. Okay. And then you select the proposal. We are also using pre-shared key. So you need to manually add the pre-shared key here. And then advanced configuration. In this case, we are working under the net environment. So you need to enable the net traversal functions. And also, as I mentioned, because the dynamic side need to be set as the initiator, and the one with the static IP will be the responder. So in this case, because this firewall is the dynamic IP, so we are the initiator, and also enable the DPD for the tunnel detection. And after the phase one, we will go to the phase 2 configuration. Also the same, we need to call the phase 1 SA here, and also configure for the tunnel. The same, we are using the tunnel mode for this side-to-side, and also select the phase 2 proposal from the drop-down list, and auto connect for the proxy ID. And the advanced configuration, we also need to enable the auto connect. So the firewall will automatically send the triggering message to establish the negotiation. So this is the configuration at the firewall that with dynamic IP. And also we need to configure the VPN instance at the peer firewall. So first of all, we need to configure this phase 1. Okay, also we need to set the same mode, which is aggressive mode. And The peer type will be the dynamic IP, and then you need to assign the peer ID as a FQDN, and also select the proposal and add the pressure key, And advanced configuration, the same. The connection type is different because this firewall with static IP, so we are responder, and you need to enable the net traversal in this net environment, and also enable the DPD. And phase 2, then we jump to the phase 2 configuration. So refer the phase 1 settings and also the tunnel configuration. So mode is tunnel and also proxy ID auto. And then advanced, enable the auto connect. And after that, we had finished the configuration for both phase 1 and phase 2 at both firewalls. And then you can, after you have configured for the tunnel interface, the root, the policies, so those three we will explain later after all this VPN instance explanation. Okay, so we assume we already added all those interface, root, and policy, and then you can go back to check the status of these two firewalls. Okay, of those two firewalls. As you can see, the connection from .77 to 197 had been established. The VPN had been established. So this is the aggressive mode IPsec VPN. And next one, we can use this aggressive mode to add additional digital certificate to do this certificate authentication for the VPN, to do the certificate-based IPsec. And you can see the topology is the same, but we will add the digital certificate. And also the digital certificate, we will do two demo. So one is for the third-party CA certificate. And as I mentioned, for firewall, we can also generate the self-signed certificate. So in this case, we can also use our self-signed certificate for the IPsec VPN. So let's have a look the third-party certificate at first. We are also using those two firewalls, which we already established with the dynamic peer VPN. So first of all, we need to go to the PKI to create a PKI key. In this case, you need to add the label name of this, and then import the third-party key pair. In this case, if you are using the DSA signature, so you need to select the key pair type as DSA, and also import the key that you received from the third party. And after that, you are able to see this key had been added into the key storage. And after that, you need to create a trusted domain. You need to manually import the CA certificate, the third-party CA certificate, which is the root certificate, and also you need to refer that key pair you just imported. And also you need to import the client certificate, which is the local certificate as well, into this trust domain. And after that, you can go back to the original VPN instance to call this certificate, call this trust domain. In this case, you need to change the local ID and peer ID. So change it to the ASN1 DN, and also the local ID will be automatically generated. So you can share this local ID to peer. And for the peer ID, you will be shared from the peer side. And then you can copy and paste the peer ID here, but the format is different as the original local ID, as you can see here. You need to remove the first slash. As you can see here, you need to remove the first slash. And also, for the middle slash, you need to change the slash to the format comma. You need to change the slash to the comma, as you can see here, until the before the CN. So the slash before the CN you need to change, and after that you don't need to change. You can keep the original format. So that is the difference. So after you copy the peer ID to your local, you need to change a little bit for the format. Remove the first slash and also change the middle slash to comma. And this is the difference. Okay, so in this case, we call this trust domain in VPN. We call this trust domain in VPN. And also for the peer side, it's the same. So you need to change the peer ID. You need to change the peer ID to call this trust domain. And this is the configuration for the third party digital certificate. And now let's have a look how to configure for the self-signed certificate. So first of all, you need to go to the key, the PKI. So there is a key storage. So you need to manually create a key settings. In this case, because we are using local self-signed, so we change the key configuration to generate. So the device will generate for the key pair, and you need to select the key pair type. So in this case, if you are using ISA signature, so you use the key as ISA key, and then click OK to generate for both the key pair, And then you need to create a trust domain. For example, this is the trust domain for your local device. And then you need to select the self-signed certificate type. So self-signed, and then refer the key pair we just generated for this .77 firewall, and then add this basic subject. Finally, you click apply certificate. So the device will automatically generate for both CA root certificate and also for local certificate. After that, you need go to the trust domain certificate and select those trust domain we just created. Select the root CA certificate and export. So you need to export your own CA certificate and then send it to the peer side. And for the peer side, you need to add a trust domain that to manually input that the root certificate from the peer firewall. And at the same time, you also need to create a trust domain for yourself. for yourself that you need to use for the certificate, for yourself. As you can see here, you also need to select your self-signed trusted domain in the VPN configuration. So in this case, we are using the self-signed certificate for the VPN authentication. So both sides, you need to share the root certificate, your local self-signed root certificate to peer, and the peer needs to create a trust domain to store this root certificate. At the meantime, in the VPN configuration, you need to refer your local trust domain, So in this case, the firewall will use this certificate to do the verification, and authentication. So that is the self-signed certificate, Ipsec VPN. And after, as I mentioned, after you have all these VPN instance configured, you need to, first of all, you need to create a tunnel interface, which is used to communicate with the remote VPN peer. So you need to bind to the VPN zone. And for IPsec, we don't need to assign the IP address. But you need to bind the VPN instance, to this tunnel interface, and then click add to add to the tunnel interface. And after that, you need to create, after you have created the tunnel interface, you need to create the route that routes the traffic through this tunnel interface. So this is your gateway. Tunnel interface is your gateway. So in this case, we need to create a destination route to route the traffic that through this tunnel interface. Okay, so this is your destination, and you select the next hop as an interface, which is your tunnel interface, and then click OK. So that is the tunnel interface-based route. So all the traffic will be routed through the tunnel interface. And finally, you need to add a bidirectional policy from the internal trust zone through the VPN zone, and then traffic permit. And you also need to add another policy for the VPN, for the traffic through the VPN to your internal zone. And also you need to add to move these two policy to the top position, of the policy list, just in case the traffic will be routed through the VPN at first. So you can move before ID2 to move these two policies to the top position, of the policy list. So this is basically the commonly used VPN instance, and also the deployment, how to configure for those VPN scenarios. And also, the last VPN one will be the Ssl VPN. So let's have a look. This is the last scenario. So previously we were talking about the commonly used IPsec. Now let's have a look the Ssl VPN configuration and also some advanced settings for SSL. So first of all, you need to create for some basic internet settings, and then you can go to the Ssl VPN configuration page. You can configure the SSL through the SSL configuration wizard by adding the SSL VPN name and also the server. So the AA server, in this case, we are using local. And then you need to configure for the SSL tunnel interface. As I mentioned, this interface is your one interface that connected to internet to listen the request from the Ssl VPN client. And also you need to specify for the service port. So default is 4433. And also you need to add a tunnel interface. So this is the gateway for the remote users and the address pool, which is the address entry used to distribute the IP address to remote users. So this is the tunnel interface and address pool. So the tunnel interface IP cannot be included in the address pool without overlapping. So this is the requirement for the tunnel interface and address pool. And also you need to create for some tunnel route. So the tunnel route here is used to distribute the destination route to the remote users. As long as the remote users successfully connected through the Ssl VPN, so they can access to these internal resources or even to other destinations by using this distributed routing table, which is the tunnel route here. And also we can configure the resource list. As I mentioned, you can add those commonly used internal system into the resource list, okay, by adding the name and also the URL into the resource list. And then you can create for some user group. You can create for some user group. So the resource list can be controlled based on the user or user group. After that, we go to the SSL configuration. There's a binding resource. So you can bind the resource list with specific user group. In this case, we use the user group test, okay, to test this list. And after that, we had been done the configuration for the Ssl VPN. And then after you successfully connected through the Ssl VPN client, so there will be a pop-up through the web browser that give you the whole list of the resource list. And then through this list, you can easily, by clicking the URL, to access to some of the internal system. Okay, so that is the resource list.